So this chapter moves us into the 20th century. But before we move into the 20th century, let's remember the end of the 18th century. The end of the 18th century was a period of sort of pessimism, ambivalence about industry and expansion. Remember our post-impressionists that were trying to isolate themselves from industrialized society. But the beginning of the 20th century is a time of optimism. This is the rise of automobiles and airplanes. And so we're starting to look a little more kindly again on sort of industrialization and progress. In art, there's a great interest in expanding the definition of art into more radical styles. And we're going to see this with Fauvism and Expressionism and then Cubism. It's a period of rapid change in art. And these periods start to tend to sort of overlap. So they develop quickly, they morph, and then they're ditched altogether. And so there's the pace at which we change styles is going to be getting more and more rapid as we move forward in time. At the heart of each of these modern movements is the idea of innovation, of change, imagination, and of course, originality. And this has really sort of come about since the time of Romanticism. These artists saw themselves as part of an artistic tradition while translating that tradition to their own unique styles. So sort of a push and pull between tradition and change/innovation. The works that you see before you are by Fauves. This period we want to look at, what are the traits of this particular group of artists? In some ways, they are tied to the past, loosely tied to the symbolists because they had an interest in literary works. But they wanted to reinvestigate Impressionism, their love of nature, and of course, leisure. We know that the Impressionists wanted to show us, again, the glass half full in terms of industrialization. But they also are somewhat tied to those post-impressionists with their interest in color and color contrast and the emotional nature of color. At the crux of each of these Fauve artists is personal authenticity. They wanted to reach personal authenticity in their work. So sometimes it's a little bit hard to find a concrete style because, of course, as we said, many of these works are so closely tied to the particular artist that it's sort of difficult to always have a sort of nice complete list of traits. Fauve can be translated to wild beast. That is a name that was given by a critic. And their identifying feature was bold, explosive color. And I think you can probably see that looking from the left to the right-hand side here. When you think Fauves, think of arbitrary color. Color is the formal element by which the artist expresses themselves. So again, this idea of self-expression is important. And here the primary vehicle is color. The Fauves accomplished what other earlier artists like Van Gogh and Gauguin and Cézanne only experimented with, and that's the idea of totally freeing color of description. So color oftentimes was so pure it came straight from the tube, and it's not necessarily used just to delineate a form, but more importantly to that than that is to give a sense of mood and of meaning. The left-hand side here is Matisse's The Open Window. The year is 1905. This is one of the first truly Fauvist works. Here are some traits that we can discuss that are particular to this style. First, flat. Let's make that number one. Very flat works. Number two, non-representational color. And so much so that you can kind of see that it doesn't even really match from side to side necessarily. So freeing color. Another thing is a diversity or inconsistent use of the brushstroke. Some of them are sort of pointillistic. You look like that pointillism, little sort of dots of color that you see there. Others are vertical and others are horizontal. So you see this sort of vertical stripes of color, and then some of them come across. And so there are all a lot of inconsistency in terms of the brushstroke. But one thing that we can say is a very great interest in broad, flat zones of color. And this, again, helps to flatten the work. So your eye kind of moves up and down, sort of side to side, but it doesn't really reach back into the work. Any depth comes from the window sort of advancing towards you rather than any kind of landscape receding back. So see with these sort of panels that are open here, they seem to come towards you, but then it really sort of flattens back. Remember where we've been previously since the time of the Renaissance. An open window has always been an invitation to look deep into the painting and show the artist's ability to create an illusion. Whereas here, it's more like a picture within a picture rather than a window and an expanse of space. So again, we have this modern notion that the painting is not reality. And so there's no interest in copying the world, devoid of course, any kind of atmospheric depth. The image on the right-hand side is called A Woman in a Hat. This is Matisse from 1905. What makes this a good sort of Fauvist work? Again, those large bands of color, inconsistent brushstroke, complementary color, arbitrary color, of course. A color, shape, and line are kind of independent from the subject matter that it's representing. So we sort of have these sort of large swaths of color. Well, that doesn't really delineate her face in any way, but that's the way the Fauves saw color. It is sort of arbitrary in that sense, in the way that it's created, and also in its need to be representational.